How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chafei, Daf 25 of masechta Avodah Zarah. Friends, I'd say most of today's Daf, most of Daf 25 is like agadata kind of things, I guess you can say. Some relatively interesting ones, I'd venture to say. Then we get into, for like a few minutes, the sugya of YICHUD. Sugya of YICHUD, we've seen it before. We've seen it in we've seen it in Kedushin. We've probably seen it elsewhere as well. And we are going to finish up the first mishna of the second perek Ein Ma'amidin of masechta Avodah Zarah, and that is what is on the agenda for today, as my fourth grade Rebbe would say, the agenda. And then we would go around the room and you would ask everybody questions, and if you got it wrong, you lost your recess. All right, good times. Okay, so Daf Chof Daled Amud Beis of masechta Avodah Zarah, about 15 or 20 lines or so from the bottom of Daf Chof Daled Amud Beis, at the two dots. What does it say? Vayisharna poris baderech al derech Beit Shemesh v'goymer. Okay, so yesterday we had talked about these cows that were sent by the Plishtim with the Aron when they were turning the Aron, and there was like a miracle that the cows walked like on their own back to Eretz Yisrael. And it says there, Vayisharna poris baderech al derech Beit Shemesh v'gomer, that they walked straight towards on their path. Now the interesting thing is that Vayisharna could also be like they were singing, they were crooning. My Vayisharna, what does Vayisharna mean? Amar b'yechon b'shimar meir sha'amru shira. They were crooning, they were singing a song. Rav Zucha bar Tuvia Amar Rav sheyashru pneim keneged Aron, that they turned, the cows turned their faces towards the holy ark, v'amru shira, and sang songs. Umay shira, what were these nigunim? Tell me. Amr ma shira amru, what were the nigunim? Amr b'yechon b'shimar meir az yasher Moshe v'nei Yisrael. Az yasher, that we say every day in Sukkei de Zimra. That's what the cows were singing. Az yasher. Rabbi Yochanan Didei Amar, that was Rabbi Yochanan quoting Rabbi Meir, but Rabbi Yochanan himself argues. V'amartim b'yei mahu hodel Hashem kiru v'shmo v'gomer. What's the rest of that pasuk? Who could tell me? V'amartim b'yei mahu hodel Hashem kiru v'shmo v'du v'amim alilosav as kiru ki niskav shmoi. Right, we say v'yitein l'chan motzei Shabbos, right? Let's kiru ki niskav shmo muda zois b'chol aretz tzali v'aroni yoshev es tzion ki gadol b'kirbech kadosh Yisrael. V'amartim b'yei mahu, was that v'amartim b'yei mahu yinei k'nezek yizim l'yoshenu? Or hold the yeah, you say v'yitein l'cha motzei Shabbos. It's gewaldig, right? Okay. So we did Mata B'Yamahu hold the Hashem Kibbutz Gomer. Reb Shimon ben Lakish, it says Reb Shimon Mizmora Yasma, the orphaned Mizmor. It's talking Machlekes Rashi and Tosfos about what this orphaned Mizmor is. No, not about what it is, but why it's called the orphan Mizmor. Mizmor shiru la'Hashem shir chadash ki niflois asa hoshir la'yaminoi u'zoh kadshoy. That was the orphaned Mizmor that was sung by the cows. Rashi says, why is it called an orphaned Mizmor? Because it doesn't say who Mizmored it. Right? It just says Mizmor shiru la'Hashem. It doesn't say Mizmor leDavid, Mizmor leAsaf. And she says it goes straight Mizmor Shir Hashem. But Tosfos points out, Take, that there's other Mizmor, Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos, Mizmor L'Soida. So rather, Tosfos says that why is it called an orphaned Mizmor? Because it doesn't tell us what it's for. Mizmor L'Soida is when you give thanks. Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos, we say on Shabbos. But Mizmor Shir Hashem Shir Chodesh is a Mizmor that we don't know the context when it should be said, so therefore it's called the orphaned Mizmor. Very interesting. Machlekes Rashi and Tosfos. Okay. Rabbi Lazar, Omar says, Rabbi Lazar, Hashem Molach, Yigzu Abim, that is the song that they crooned, the cows crooned. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Omar, Hashem Molach, Geus, Lavish, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Omar, says Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, a very interesting bit. Roni, oh yeah, I don't actually know how to translate this, so I'm going to pull out my Art Scroll Assistant over here. Let me pull it up, and here we go. Okay. Roni, Hashita. Sing, oh, acacia. Did I say that right? Acacia? Akasha? I don't know. Hisnofafi Barov Haderech. Be exalted in your profound broody. Oh, Barov Hadarech. Hisnofafi Barov Hadarech. Be exalted in your profound beauty. Hamchushekes birik mezov, you who are girded with golden trappings. Hamhulala b'dvir armin, who are glorified through the book of the palace. So keep in mind, Dvir Armin, the book of the palace. Dvir is a book that's going to come up in a second. Umifayara ba'adi adayim, and are adorned with the crown of crowns. Now that is a very nice little ditty. So now, that was the opinion of Yitzchak Nafcho. Rav Ashi masni lo lahadar Yitzchak Nafcho aha. So Rav Ashi actually says that this beautiful ditty of Yitzchak Nafcho was actually on the following, Vayibin Soya Orin Vayomer Moshe, that when the ark traveled, Moses said, Kumu Hashem. You saw my Amr. What did the Yidden say? Amr Yitzchak Roini Ashita. That was the context of Roni. That's what the Yidden said. Gewaldig. Omer Rab Kiman Koru Parsoy L'Sifra Dvir. Rav says, why do the Persians call books Dvirs? From the verse, Mehacha, from the verse, is a book of Dvir in Parsi? Who speaks Parsi? Do we have Persians at Babylon Talmud? Anybody speak Parsi? Farsi. Anybody speak Farsi at Babylon Talmud? Is a book of Dvir in Farsi? What do you think? V'shem Dvir lifonim Kiryas Sefer. So Dvir, the place Dvir was initially called Kiryas Sefer. So that's why they call a Sefer a Dvir. Omer Rav Ashi Kiman Koru Parsoy L'Nida Dashtona. Says Rav Ashi, why do the Persians called a Nida a Dashtona? Mehocha ki derech noshim li. Right? When Rachel says to her father Lavan that the way of women is upon me, derech noshim is like the shin of noshim and the dalet of derech noshim, right? Dashtona. Okay. Now the Gemara now gets to a very interesting discussion, in my opinion. There is a story in the book of Joshua about when the sun stopped in the heavens and there was extra hours of daylight. We're going to get into a machlokes about just how much extra daylight was there. Vayidom hashemesh, the sun stopped. V'areach omad, and the moon stood. Ad yikoim goy oivav, until a nation avenged its enemies. Halo yiksuv al sefer hayosher, it is written on the straight book. My sefer hayosher, what's the straight book? That's Sefer Avram Yitzchak V'Yaakov. That's Bereshis, the first of the 5 books of Moses. Sefer Bereshis, that is the Sefer Yashar, the book of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Shenikru Yasharim, who are called straight. They're called Yashar. Where are they called Yashar? Shneimar is Bilam. That's going to be next week's Parsha. Next week's Parsha for me, I think maybe your week's Parsha for you. By the time this comes out, it might be either Parshas Balak, Erev Parshas Balak, something like that. Who knows? Maybe Sunday. I don't know when these things go live. So anyways, my Sefer Yashar Amar B'chir B'Abam B'Yechin Zeh Sefer Avram Yitzchak V'Yaakov. I'm repeating. Shenikru Yesharim Shenemar Tomois Nafshi Mois Yesharim. that Bilam says that I should die a straight death like, or I should be able to expire like the Yesharim expired, like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov expired. So we see that Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are called Yesharim. They're called Yesharim. Okay, so therefore, so back to the pasuk. I'm going back to the top line of Chafay Amar Aleph. Vayidom Hashemesh v'Erech Omer Ad Yikoim Goy Oiva V'Aloi Ksuva Al Sefer HaYosher. Apparently, this tale, this incident where the sun and the moon just stopped in the constellation was recorded already in Sefer Bereshis. Meaning, even though it happened for Joshua, but it was already recorded in Sefer Bereshis. Where is this in Bereshis? That Jacob says to Joseph when he's blessing his son Ephraim, Vizara, his seed, Ephraim's seed, Yiyem Lo Yagoyim, will be filled of all the nations. All the nations are going to know about the offspring of Ephraim. Because Yoshua ben Nun, right? L'matei Ephraim, L'matei Ephraim, Hoshea ben Nun, right? That Yoshua ben Nun was from the tribe of Ephraim. So when will all of the nations know about the offspring of Ephraim? When the sun stopped for Joshua. It was like the shot that was heard around the world. The sun stopping in the heaven that was heard around the world. There was the stop that was heard around the world. That's what it was. The stop that was heard around the world. Vayamer Hashemesh b'chatzi hashamoyim. V'lo yotz lavo ki yom tomim. So if you notice, there were two stops there. If you notice, there were two stops there. Again. Vayamer Hashemesh b'chatzi hashamayim. So the sun rose in the morning, and it was doing its thing until it got midway through the day. 6 hours into the day, right? We assume a 12-hour day. So 6 hours into the day, all was hunky-dory, and then it stopped. Right? Vayamer Hashemesh b'chatzi hashamayim. The sun stopped halfway through the heavens. V'lo yotz lavo ki yom tomim. And it did not then set for a whole day. So apparently it stopped halfway through the day and then stopped again before setting. So it stopped twice, halfway through the day and at the end of the day. So we can see three opinions for just how long this day was. So Vayamer Hashem b'chatzi hashamayim v'lo yotz lavo ki yom tomim. V'chama. So how long are we talking about? How long did everything stop for? Rabbi Shua ben Levi says 24 hours. Normally a day is 12 hours, right? We assume Shazmani, let's take the daylight, divide in 12. Okay, we're talking about a 12-hour day, okay? So the day is normally 12 hours. But in this instance, there was another 12 hours were added. It was a 24 hours of daylight. Where are we? 24 hours of daylight. Ozil Shis, the sun rose for 6 hours. V'kom Shis, and then stopped halfway for 6 hours. Ozil Shis then made its way down for 6 hours. V'kom Shis, and then stopped for 6 hours before setting. Kula Milsa Kiyom Tomim. And the whole situation from sunrise to Tzeisak Kechavim to night time, we were talking about 24 hours. 6, 6, 6, and 6. Rabbi Lazar says, Shloshim Vishis. Rabbi Lazar says that we're talking about a 36-hour day, 36 hours of daylight. Ozil Shis, the sun rose for 6 hours, Vikom Tracer, and then stopped for 6 hours. Ozil Shis went for another 6 hours, Vikom Tracer, and then stopped for another 12 hours. Amidaso Kiyom Tomim. The amount that the sun stopped for was 24 hours. So it went for 6 hours, stopped for 12. Went for another 6, stopped for 12. So it stopped for 12 plus 12, stopped for a total of 24 hours. in addition to the 12 hours that the sun, travels normally. So we were talking about a 36 hours of daylight. Rabbi Shmuel ben Achmani Omer Arboyim Vishmone. Rabbi Shmuel ben Achmani says we're talking about 48 hours of daylight. Ozil Shis, the sun rose for 6 hours, Vikom Tracer, and stopped for 12 hours. Ozil Shis Vikom Esrim Ve'arboya, and went for another 6 hours and then stopped for 24 hours. That the sun did not set for 24 hours, meaning when it became right, when the sun got to the point where normally it would set, it stopped. Kiyom Tamim, like a full day. It stopped for 24 hours. So what did the pasuk say? The pasuk Vayamar Hashemesh b'chatzi hashemaim. So the sun stopped halfway through the heavens. It doesn't say for how long. So we're gonna have to figure out what a default amount, a standard amount is. And then it says, and then before it then at the end of the day did not set for 24 hours. So the second time it stopped before sunset was for 24 hours. And the first time that it stopped was for a standard amount. What's the standard amount? Well, at night when it stops, so to speak, the night is 12 hours. So I guess we see that when the sun stops, it's generally for 12 hours. So a standard stop is a 12-hour stop. So therefore says Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, no. Therefore says, whose opinion was this? Who could tell me? Rabbi Shmuel ben Achmani, that we're talking about a 48-hour day. So let's read that again. Right, first wide line. Rabbi Shmuel ben Achmani, Omar, Arboim v'shmone, 48 hours of daylight. Ozil Shis, the sun was rising for 6 hours. Vikom Tracer then stopped for a standard amount of time, which is 12 hours. Ozil Shis, and then went another 6 hours. Vikom Esem Varboya, and then stopped for 24 hours before it set. Shenem Avle Otzlavoy Kiyoim Tomim. That it stopped before setting for 24 hours. Michlal, implying to Meikara, Lav Kiyoim Tomim. Hava, implying that the first stop was not for 24 hours, it was for 12 hours. We have 6 and 12, and 6 is 24, plus another 24 is 48. However, there is another way to understand this machlokes between Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Shmuel ben Achmani, 24 hours, 36 hours, and 48 hours respectively. We just explained that the 24 hours, 36 hours, 48 hours are the amount of daylight that day. There is another opinion that no, these numbers represent the amount of added time to the day. So 24 hours is really 36 hours. 36 hours is really 48 hours. 48 hours is really 60 hours. Let's see. Right, that this machlokes is about the added amount of time in addition to the standard 12 hours of daylight. Pligi Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Rabbi Tosefus Pligi Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Omar says Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Esem Varboya, 24 hours of added daylight. Ozil Shis, okay, the sun rose for 6 hours like it always does, and then in the middle of the day, Vikom Tracer, it stopped for 12 hours. Also Shis went another 6 hours, Vikom Tracer, and stopped once again for 12 hours. So therefore you had 6 and then 12, and then 6 and then 12. So the added amount of time was 24 hours. Amidaso Kiyom Tomim. It stopped for 24 hours, meaning the normal day was 12, but it then, in addition to the normal day, it was stopped for a total of 24 hours. Elazar says, it was stopped, in addition to the normal 12 hours of daylight, it was stopped for 36 hours. Ozil Shis, it went normally for 6 hours. Vikom Tracer then stopped for 12 hours. Ozil Shis went another 6 hours, Vikom Eser Varboya, and then stopped for 24 hours. V'lo Kiyom Tomim. That right before it set, there was 24 hours right before it set, and the initial stopping in the middle of the yom was a standard stopping, which we said was 12 hours, because that's how long the sun, quote unquote, stops at night. So 6, and then 12, and then 6, and then 24, for a total of 36 extra hours, 48 hours of daylight. Rabbi Shmuel ben Achmani Omar, we're actually talking about 48 hours of stoppage. Ozil Shis, it went for 6 hours, become Esim V'Arboya, and then stopped for 24 hours. Ozil Shis went for another 6 hours, become Chav Daled, and then stopped for another 24 hours. And how come both stoppages were for 24 hours? Because Makish Amidaso the Biyaso, that we compare the stopping halfway through the day to when it stopped right before it set. Mabiyasoi Kiyom Tom, just like it says, that it was 24 hours right before sunset. So also when it stopped halfway through the day, that was also for 24 hours. So there was a total of 48 hours of stoppage in addition to the 12 hours of daylight. Exciting times here at Babylon Talmud. Tana was taught in a Brisa just like the sun stopped for Joshua, the sun also stopped for Moses and for Nakdim ben Gurion. Yoshua cried. Yoshua, as we learned in the Psukim, right? Etc. So, where am I? Yoshua cried. Nakdim ben Gurion Gemara. Nakdim ben Gurion was a story in the Gemara in masechta Tainis that we learned a long time ago. I don't know, 4.5 years ago? I don't know when. 3.5 years ago, 4.5 years ago, I can't remember. It was during COVID. I think I got COVID-19 during masechta Tainis, I think. So Nakdim ben Gurion, Gemara, so that says, so that was a story in the Gemara in masechta Tainis. The Moshe, and how do we know that the sun also stopped in the heavens for Moses? I said, Ochel. Well, because it says Ochel by Joshua and Ochel by Moses. It says by Moses, Ochel tes pachtocho. Also by Yoshua, and it says by Joshua, Ochel gadelcha. So Ochel, and because it says Ochel in both places, so just like by Joshua, the sun stopped, so also by Moses, the sun stopped. Reb Yochanan Omar, says Reb Yochanan, I said, taste. It says by Moses, Ochel taste. Pachtocho. So by Yoshua, it says by Joshua, B'yom taste. Hashem is Amori. So therefore, just like the sun stopped for Joshua, it stopped for Moses. Reb Shmuel ben Nachmani Omar migufe dekro. Shmuel ben Nachmani says you could just learn that pasuk from that pasuk itself by Moses. The pasuk of Hayom, it is by Moses. Hayom hazeh ochel teis pachtocho v'yiroscha pnei amim tachas kol hashamayim asher yishmeun shim'acho v'rogzu v'chol mipanecho. That the pasuk says by Moses, right? Migufa the Kosham is like Asher Yishmun Shim'acha V'rogzu, that they're going to hear about you and be scared. V'chol mipanecha, and be scared from before you. Masai rogzu v'chol mipanecha. When are they going to be so scared of you? B'shasham delay Chamel Moshe. When the sun stopped for Moses, it made all of the nations really, really scared. But we have a kasha on this. How could it be that the sun stopped for others? The pasuk Pashit says by Joshua that there never was such a day prior or post. So how could it be that it also happened for Moses? It also happened for Nakdim ben Gurion. Well, one explanation could it be that Joshua was the only time that it happened for so long, right? The minimum number that we saw was for 24 hours. That's a long time. Nakdimo and Ben Gurion and Moses, it wasn't for that long. Alternatively, Avnei Barod Lohayu. In those instances, by Moses and Nakdim and Ben Gurion, there were no stone hail. When they were fleeing from the Yidden, there were big stones that fell from the sky until Azeka, and all the enemies gestorbened. Okay, nice. So that was unique to Joshua. Ksiv vayomer lilamid b'nei Yehuda keshes, to teach to the children of Judah bow and arrow. Hineksuva al sefer Yasher, and this skill of the bow and arrow for the children of Judah, that is recorded in the straight book, in the Sefer Yasher. My Sefer Yasher, what's the straight book? As we saw earlier, the Sefer Avram Yitzchak Yaakov, Bereshis. Shnikri Yisharim, they were called Yisharim. Dichsiv, Behu most Tamus Nafshi, most Yisharim. It's said by Bilam, Tamus Nafshi, most Yisharim, like the Yisharim, which Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. Where am I? Okay, Tamus Nafshi, most Yisharim, that Usi Achrisi Kamo. Ve'echor Miza. Now, where in Sefer Bereshis is there a reference to the children of Judah with bow and arrows? Well, it says, Yehuda ato yoducha achecha yodcha be'oref oivecha. That Jacob says about Judah in Parshas Vayichi. He says, Judah, you, ato yoducha achecha, your brothers will, I don't know, submit to you, thank you, praise you. Yodcha be'oref oivecha, your hand is on the back of the head of your enemies. Ve'ezoi milchama shetzricha yad keneged oref. What is the type of fighting that requires your hand parallel to the back of your head? Havayom is a keshes, that is firing a bow. Rabbi Elazar Omer says, Rabbi Elazar is a Sefer Mishnah Torah. The Sefer Yasher is actually Sefer Dvarim. V'amai karule Sefer Yasher. Why is Sefer Dvarim called the Sefer Yasher? D'chsiv v'asisa Yasher v'atov ben Hashem. Because in Sefer Dvarim it says to do the Yasher and the Tov in the eyes of God. Ve'echra Miza, and where in Sefer Dvarim is there a reference to Judah and bow and arrows? Yadav Ravloi, that it says by Judah in Parshas Zois Abroche, Yadav Ravlo, he's got lots of hands. What's the type of fighting that requires two hands? Haviyom keshes, that's a bow and arrows. Rabbi Shmuel ben Achmani, is a Sefer Shoftim. Says Shmuel ben Achmani, the Sefer Yasher is the book of Judges. V'amai korule Sefer Yasher. Why is it called Sefer Yasher? D'chsiv, as it says in the beginning of the book of Judges, by Yomi Mahem ein melech b'Yisrael, there was no king in Israel. Ish ayosher be'ein of Yaise, whatever a person felt was straight in his eyes, he did. So it says Yosher, he's ayosher be'ein of Yaise. Ve'echer Miza, where in Judges is a reference to Judah and bows and arrows. The mandas doris b'nei Yisrael lilamdom milchama. That all of the generations of Israel should know milchama, war. Raising milchama shetzricha limud, lilamda milchama, to teach them war. What type of battle requires learning? Have yomer zo keshes, that's a bow and arrow. You got to learn how to use that. To be Yehuda ksiv, and how do we know that this warring is a reference to Judah and with the bows and arrows? The ksiv miyar lelanu el aknayim batchila liilachim ba vayom Hashem Yehuda. Who's going to lead us in battle? Judah will. So therefore, the reference to battles, Memela reference to Judah, and it talks about Lelamdom, Milchama, to teach them warring, and the type of warring that must be taught is bow and arrowing. Vayorma tevach ataboch es ashoik v'aleo vayosmuf neshol, that the butcher picked up the thigh and what is upon it, and placed it before Saul. Maiva aleo, what is the stuff that's upon the thigh? Reb Yochanan Omer says, Reb Yochanan shok ve aliyah, the thigh and the fatty tail. Umaiva aleo, the misamcha shok le aliyah. Why is the fatty tail referred to as aliyah? Because the thigh is close to the fatty tail. Rabbi Elazar says, Rabbi Elazar shok v'chazeh, the leg and the breast. My ve'aleh, why is the breast referred to what is upon the thigh? Demachis la lechazeh ilavi the shok kiboy anufe uman pile. That when there's a korban and you do tenufa, so you take the thigh and you put upon it the breast and you wave it. So therefore, the breast is upon the thigh. Rav Shmuel ben Achmani Omar shok v'shofi, the thigh and the hip bone or something. Why is the hip bone referred to what's upon, like the hip socket? Why is it referred to what's upon the thigh? Shofi ilove the shokoi, because the hip bone is sort of above the thigh. I guess it like fits in the thigh. I guess fits into like the hip bone or something, and the hip bone's on top. Sharna, what do you have to say? It's that sounds about right. Hopefully. Okay, now getting back to our Mishnah, we are now going to kind of start closing in on our Mishnah, and we're going to get to the next Mishnah. Here we go. So the first Mishnah and the second perek of masechta Avodah Zarah had two halachos at the end of it. The first one being that a Jewish woman should not be secluded with an oved koichavim, because there's a concern for arayas that he's going to sleep with it, the mice. So now the interesting thing is, so the Gemara wants to know, like, wait, so what's the Mishnah saying? The Mishnah is saying that a Jewish woman should not be alone with an oved koichavim because we're concerned about arayas. Guess what, friends? A Jewish woman shouldn't be alone with a Jewish man either because we're concerned about arayas. That's what YICHUD is. So what's unique here to oved koichavim? But Ma'askina, what are we talking about? We're talking about that one Jewish woman should not be alone with one oved koichavim. I don't understand. The same scenario, if you swapped oved koichavim for a yid, that's also not allowed. We're also concerned about arayas. One Jewish fellow, should not be alone with, certainly not with one, but even with two Jewish women. So, right, so a woman cannot be alone with a Jewish man. So what's the chiddush about the koichavim? I mean, there's nothing new here. Ela betlasa. Well, maybe we'll suggest one woman with three ovdei koichavim, because after all, one woman with two men, right? In the Jewish context, one woman with two men. And Rashi says, why did the Mishnah say three men? Technically, all you need is two. Okay, he explains why. Because if you remember from masechta Kiddushin, technically, if they go traveling, one woman and two men, there's no yichud. But if one of them goes to take a leak, well, then they're going to be alone together. So if you're traveling, you should have three. So okay, we mentioned three because that would even cover the case of traveling. But be'etzem, one woman with two men is no longer an issue of yichud, certainly not three men. But the thing is, by prutzim, if those three men are inappropriate, well then even if it's one woman with 100 men, it makes no difference. If they're all prutzim, well then more men isn't going to help anything. The point of the theory is that the two men are going to be, if they're not prutzim, so they were, while if it was just one-on-one, maybe something can happen between the man and the woman. But one man in front of another man, with the assumption is, the concept is that they would be a little embarrassed to have this relationship now with the three of them. But the thing is, if they're inappropriate men, well then that is irrelevant. So now here's the thing. So if we're saying that the Mishnah is talking about, okay, so one Jewish woman should not be alone with three or two ovdei koichavim. The thing is that if the assumption is that the ovdei koichavim are prutzim, well, yidden that are also prutzim also would not be allowed. So again, what's the chiddush here? Right? So the kavosa gabi yisobe prutzim mishari, but by yidden that are prutzim, that's not allowed either. So what's the chiddush here to say that it's not allowed by the ovdei koichavim? One woman can be secluded with two men. We're not concerned about arayas there. That, however, is only if the two men are ksherim. Two, upstanding men can be alone with one woman because the assumption is there won't be any arayas there. But if those two men were not trustworthy, were licentious, afilu asara nami lo. Well, then even if there were 10 of them, it wouldn't help. After all, there was once a ma'aseh asar b'mita that 10 men who were licentious took out a woman in a coffin, because it was like a scheme, so that nobody would see them all going together to some secluded place. So they put her in the coffin, and you have 10 men carrying out the coffin, and people thought there was some kind of levi or something, so they didn't suspect, and then they went out and had this inappropriate relationship there. So we see that even 10 men isn't going to help if they're all kind of licentious. I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm using it. So again, what's the scenario where the Mishnah had to tell us that that a woman should not have yichud with an oved kocham? A woman can't have yichud with yid neither. So what's the scenario where it's also by the oved kocham, but by the yid we wouldn't be concerned? What's unique here by the oved kocham? Lo tzricha be'ishtoi imo. So it's talking about a scenario where the oved kochavim's wife is with him, and it would still not be allowed. So by yidden, if a woman is allowed to be alone, well, technically not alone, but let's say alone with a Jewish man, a Jewish woman is allowed to be alone with a Jewish man if they're not actually alone, if his wife is there. His wife is there, then the assumption is nothing is going to go wrong. However, that does not carry over to Ovdei Kochavim. Even if the Ovdei Kochavim's wife is there, that is not going to help. When his wife is with him. Ovdei Kochavim ein ishta mishamayto. By an Ovdei Kochavim, his wife is not going to guard him and prevent anything from happening. Yisrael ishta mishamayto. But by a Yid, his wife will make sure that he's not going to do anything inappropriate there. So now the Gemara asks an interesting question, and there's also an interesting answer. Isn't that an interesting question? Because the Mishnah then continues and says, "V'ish lo yisachid imoyen." What does the Mishnah say? V'lo yisachid odom imoyen mipnei shechshud al shfichus dam. And also a man should not be alone with an oved kochavim, because ovdei kochavim are killers, or they might be killers. We have to be concerned about that. So the interesting question is, when you have a woman alone with an oved kochavim, we're concerned about arayos. What about shfichus damim? What happened to that? So now there's an interesting answer. There's actually a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos here. Tosfos is complex, so we'll just go with Rashi's explanation. Rashi is an interesting explanation. So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah. So it says Rabbi Yomi, I'll tell you why we're not concerned about shfichus damim here, about murder here. Because be'isha chashuva askina dimratze mina. Interesting. We're talking about an isha chashuva. And I'll explain that in a second. We're talking about an isha chashuva, therefore we're not concerned about shfichus damim, but we are concerned about arayos. And Rashi explains, what does isha chashuva mean? That she's chashuv in two aspects. As we're going to see, as is going to be relevant in another minute, that she's chashuva both, but she's all around chashuva. She's both chashuva bein anoshim and bein anoshim. She's chashuva with the men and chashuva with the women. What does it mean to be chashuva with the men, and what does it mean to be chashuva with the women? To be chashuva with the men means that she's connected. She has protexia. She's connected to the government. She's a powerful woman. This Oved Kochavim won't lay a finger on her, because let's not go that far, but he's not going to kill her because she's a powerful, connected woman. However, she's also chashuva bein hanoshim, and Rashi explains that to mean that he's attracted to her, that she's beautiful, he's attracted to her. So therefore, on account of the fact that she's very powerful, he won't kill her, but he is attracted to her, so we're concerned about arayos. Okay? So Rabbi Yirmiyah be'isha chashuva askinon. Says Rabbi Yirmiyah, we're talking about an isha chashuva, that she's both powerful and beautiful. The meratze mina, he's scared of her, he's scared to kill her, but he isn't scared to sleep with her. Rabbi Idi doesn't make any of these distinctions about being chashuva, about being beautiful, about, you won't want to kill her, but he won't want to sleep. Rabbi Idi simply says, what does he say? Isha kleizena alel. Rabbi Idi has an interesting answer, which is, I don't really know how to a woman, her weapons are on her, but not like actual weapons. Apparently, Rav Idi's opinion is that the Ovid Kochavim simply won't kill her. They're not going to kill women, okay? And therefore, women are sort of like inherently protected from being killed, but not from arayos. So therefore, says Rav Idi, I don't care if she's important or not important. She's not going to be killed. And I don't care if she's beautiful or not, if he's attracted to her or not. They're still concerned about arayos. So that's Rav Idi's answer, right? Why are we not concerned about shvichus dam? Because isha klezeina aleh. Because he's not going to kill her. That's why we're not concerned about shvichus dam. Right? We're concerned that he might kill a Jewish man, but not a Jewish woman. That is not a concern. Isha klezeina aleh. But there is a concern about arayos. My benayu. Now, what's the nafka between Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rav Idi? Right? According to both, he's not going to kill her. What would be the difference if he's not going to kill her because she's important, or he's not going to kill her because she's a woman? What's the difference? The difference is, what if you have a woman who is important but not beautiful? So therefore, because she's important, so going to Rabbi Yirmiyah, because she's important, he's not going to kill her, but he's also not attracted to her. So technically, there's no concern about yichud in this scenario. He's not going to kill her, and he's also not going to sleep with her because he's not attracted to her. According to Rav Idi, however, it's not. These things aren't subjective; they're objective. He's not going to kill her because he's not going to kill her. She's a woman, but there is still a concern about arayos, according to Rav Idi. It's just a general concern. Okay, fine. Tani Kavazid of Idi, we have a brisa in support of Rav Idi's opinion. Kavazid of Idi Baravin. Ha'isha apapisha shalom ima, a woman, even though there is peace upon her, even though klezeina aleo, even though there's no concern about shvichus damim, nonetheless, lo tisachid imoen, she still should not be alone with them, because we have to be concerned about arayos, full stop, right? So even though there is no concern about shvichus damim, because klezeina aleo, keilu, there's shalom ila, there's peace upon her. She doesn't have to be concerned about shvichus damim, but she does have to be concerned about arayos. So that is like Rav Idi. And now we're going to finish up with some kind of lighter kind of things. So we said also a man should not be alone with an Ovid Kochavim because we're concerned about shvichus damim. Tanabana the rabbis taught Yisrael is damim Ovid Kochavim baderech. So what happens if a yid is walking someplace and next to him is an Ovid Kochavim, and the yid does it right? This Ovid Kochavim can be an unpredictable guy. Again, we're not talking about a ger toshav, somebody who follows the Shev Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. Talking about an unpredictable guy over here, a guy who would kill, right? So what do? So here's the advice, Chaver. Listen, here's the advice. Toflo liyamino, keep him to your right. Wait, did I skip? No. Says Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, if the guy is a sword, so I guess the sword a person would hold in like a sheath or something on your left thigh, so you could pull it out with your right hand from your left thigh, if you've ever seen like sword movies. So therefore, stand to his left, meaning he should be to your right, so that you're closer to the sheath, so you can pull it away and slice his head off or something. Okay, but if the guy has a staff, if he's walking with a stick, well then the stick is going to be in his right hand, so you better be to his right, he better be to your left, so you could snatch the stick if you need to. Toflo the smaller should be on your left, because the stick is in his right hand. If you're going up a hill or down a hill, lo yisrael lamata, the yid should never be at the bottom, below. With the Ovid Kochavim above, ella yisrael lamata, the yid should make sure he's always on top. For Ovid Kochavim lamata, and the Ovid Kochavim is lower than he is. By Yashuach the fun of Shemer Yared says Golgato, and don't bend over in front of him because you might crack your skull. Now, if the Oivik Kochavim asks the Yid, hey, Yidala, where are you going? Where art thou gegangen? Yachiv lo aderech, the Yid should tell him that he's going twice as far as he's in fact going. Because that way, right, if, he's only planning to go a mile, but he says, I'm going 2 miles, so then maybe the Oivik Kochavim will say to himself, I'm going 2 miles, in the second mile, I'm going to do something bad. But really, the Yid's only going 1 mile, so after 1 mile, he bounces, and then the bad thing never happens. Kederech also Yaakov Avinu, like Jacob our father did le'esav to Esau, Harasha, the evil Esau. Tichsiv Adasher over Ladoni Seira, that Jacob says to Esau, I'm going to go all the way to Seir. Uchsiv Yaakov Nosa Sukkot, but it says he only went as far as Sukkot. Ma'aseh b'Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, there was a ma'aseh with the students of Rabbi Akiva. Shoyuholchen l'chziv, they were walking to Chziv. However, Pogoboy enlisted him, but bandits joined them. I think Jewish bandits. The bandits say, where are y'all headed? So the students of Rabbi Akiva said, La'ako, we're going far away. We're going all the way to Akko, even though they were going to Chziv, which was not as far. When they got to Chziv, Pershu, they bounced. And the bandits then said to the students, whose students are you? And the students said, Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, we are the students of Rabbi Akiva. And the bandits said to them, well, Asher Rabbi Akiva, praiseworthy is Rabbi Akiva, v'Talmidav and his students, Shalei Pagabo and Adam Rami Olam, that no bad person ever interfered with them. Basically, the bandits said, well, you guys are... That was very clever, right? They said they were going further than in fact they were going, and then they bounced early before anything happened to them. Now, a similar story happened with Rabbi Menashe in Bavel, right? The first story, of course, happened in Eretz Yisrael, where Rabbi Akiva was, but now the following story happened in Bavel. Rabbi Menashe Ava Ozil Levei Torasa. Rabbi Menashe was going to Beit Torasa in Bavel, Pagu Be Ganuve, and again, Jewish bandits, Jewish thieves joined him. Amrulay, they said to him, where are you going? Amrulay, Pumbedisa. He says, I'm going to Pumbedisa. I'm going all the way to Pumbedisa. Kimatele Terasa, Parish, and sure enough, when he got to Beit Torasa, closer than Pumbedisa, he bounced. Parish, he bounced Amrulay, and they said to him, Talmida, Talmida, the Yehuda Rama'at, you must be a student of Judah the trickster, of Judah the trickster of Rav Yehuda. Amalu Yadisule, and Ramasha says to the thieves, oh yeah, how do you really know that he's a trickster? Why are you calling him a trickster? Yehi may be the will that these people, that the thieves, should be excommunicated in Rav Yehuda's excommunication. They then tried being thieves for 22 years. And they had no atzlocha. They had no success after this excommunication was excommunicated upon them. It's interesting that it was 22 years, because 22 years, right, the end of masechta brachos, that was the amount of time that Rabbah was the Rosh Yeshiva of Pumbedisa after Rav Yehuda. When they realized after 22 years that we are not succeeding, asu kulu tavu shamtaru, so they went to go and to undo the excommunication, to get some kind of tshuva, I guess. V'havu behu chad gerdina, but among these thieves, one of them was a weaver, tlo asa l'sharuya, and he didn't come to undo the the excommunication against him. The sharuya shamte, ochle iron, he was eaten by a lion. This is what the people say, gerdina delo taizen, a weaver that is not humble, shata batzu mishnei, he's going to die younger. So come and see the difference between the thieves of Bavel and the bandits of Eretz Yisrael. Because in Eretz Yisrael, when the bandits got tricked, they say, wow, kol hakavod, fortunate the student as Rabbi Akiva and his students that nothing bad happens to them. They're very sharp and witting. However, the opposite happened in Bavel. When Rabbi Menashe pulled the same thing against the thieves in Bavel, they got all upset and they called Rabbi Yehuda a trickster, and they became all mess. They got excommunicated and stuff. One of them got eaten by a lion. In Eretz Yisrael, the bandits have class. That was daf Chav Hey of masechta Avodah Zarah. It was an interesting daf. A lot of agadata on this daf. We talked about the cows that were bringing back the Aron to Eretz Yisrael from the Plishtim. We talked about the story with Joshua when the sun and the moon stopped, and we said that it happened to Moshe Rabbeinu and Akdim Ben Gurion as well. We got into the sugya of YICHUD, which is a very interesting sugya, and then we wrapped up with some interesting agadatas. And tomorrow we will continue with the second mishna of the second perek of masechta Avodah Zarah. Peace out.